undoubtedly the best thing is seeing how people develop. I mean, coming in as fairly raw, with little previous exposure to scientific research and scientific research technique, and then seeing how they grow into that role and develop and leave, and then watching as their careers develop subsequently.
For me, it's working with bright, enthusiastic young people. So we're really fortunate here to have students who come in through 4-year programs, and they're generally very motivated and enthusiastic.
I like to think of each of the students as individuals and take them on board as individuals, treat them with respect, and I'm very much aware, and I tell this to the students, that they are going to be the people who are going to be reviewing my research grants in the years ahead.
I like to try and find a way to encourage them to develop their own ideas where I can, but just keep them on track to make sure they're going to deliver a thesis at the end of the day, because that's what they have to do to show that they're getting a PhD.
So what you would do is obviously start off by making them feel comfortable in their environment, giving them a clear idea of what their objectives are, and then putting processes in place to make sure that they're getting the support that they need.
I know some supervisors like to just let them get on with it and sink or swim it. It's not something I like to do. I like to try and give them a bit of guidance.
I like my students to feel as if they're in a very supportive research environment, so when they come I like to welcome them and have a welcome event for them rather than a leaving do. I like to embed them within my own group, get them on their feet talking and networking with students within the department and then within the wider university.
I'd like to meet my research students once a week face to face, just to discuss what they've been doing. For some of the ones who don't work as hard in the lab, it keeps them on track to make sure they have to show me something every week. And for the other ones who are keen to go off and do their own thing, I just to make sure that they're not veering away too much on what they should be doing. That works very well for me, and I think it's quite an important relationship really. It's a stressful thing doing a PhD, so it's good to give them some time.
So I've supervised a small number of part-time students, and actually the approach is very much the same. The requirements are often very similar. It's just the timescales that are involved.
Yeah, so the part-time students are generally working, so they can be a little bit older, more experienced, got stronger ideas of what they want to do.
They also need to be clear to allocate their time directly to the PhD rather than to have whatever's conflicting with whether it's their job or their family commitments. They need to directly allocate the time to their PhD.
Yeah, it's a limit to what you can't do tissue culture that you've got to come in every day to feed the cells if they're only here 2 days a week. So practical issues like that. But in general, the people who come and do it are particularly motivated if they're doing it part-time because they're having to balance 2 different things.
Language can be an issue. So you have to make sure that when you explain things to somebody who has English as not their first language, that you've explained it clearly and that they've understood, and that they can then demonstrate their understanding in writing.
I personally like to get them on their feet talking at their lab meetings and presenting their work, so I get an idea early on how well they write and how well they orally present their work. And then if there are complications, or if their English or oral or written isn't of a high enough standard, I like to send them towards English classes within the university to improve those techniques.
People bring food and we enjoy each other's cultures. We've had nights reading poetry from different countries, that kind of thing, and it's to try and make them welcome, but everyone enjoys that.
It may be that you need to take a little bit more care making sure that they settle in better, but actually, again, I think that's more to do with personality than whether you're a national, international or a local student. Being staff suggests that you have an expertise and an ability in a certain area, but the requirements of a PhD are different, and so it's making sure that people have the appropriate level of supervision and input so that they can perform to their best abilities.
At the end of the day, when they have their exam, they have more examiners as staff, so that can be a bit daunting for them. They have to have 2 external examiners and 1 or 2 internals, so it's a bit more of a challenge, but generally it's not been too much of a problem.
Something that is important to work on is making sure that distance students feel that they're part of the university, so that they get the interaction from the university, they feel a sense of belonging, and that they understand what support is available for them to help them with their studies.
If a PhD student didn't want an academic career, the advice I would give a research supervisor is, first of all, to continue to have positive conversations with them around this, but not necessarily to think that they can support them in sort of identifying the options that might be available to them. But maybe thinking about PhD students who've gone through their research groups in the past, researchers who've gone through their research groups, and thinking about those who might have moved into non-academic careers, and thinking about providing contacts for the PhD student. Also thinking about helping them to develop, to identify the skills and experience that they have developed throughout their PhD experience that could be transferable to a range of other careers.
If they're interested in research, I'll try and introduce them to people collaborators, people meet at conferences.
There is a whole raft of courses that are available to students which will be based around their translational skills and career development. And the expectation is that students will take up a certain number of those courses during their studies.
Fortunately, in the university, we've got very good support services. So we have good training. So we have research supervisor training, and there's PI training.
One of the national sort of organisations that's really useful for PhD students and will also support PhD supervisors is the VITAI organisation, which is a national organisation that supports the career development of research students and research staff. And it's got a lot of really good resources, and those resources are fed into by careers professionals and research and development professionals across the UK. So there's a lot of sort of expertise that goes into developing a lot of those resources, and they're particularly useful.
One of the best courses I went here was on managing your research team, which was run by the university. And not only does it tell you how to be a researcher yourself, but it also gives you guidelines on how to manage people. But probably the most important thing is it was able to direct you to where there are other sources of information and other bodies within the university where you can get help and support as required.
Take up all opportunities you can to get some training about the training that university offers for research supervision.
In the career service at Edinburgh, one of the things that we do is we provide some web resources for research supervisors to help them think about how they might structure a career conversation with their research students.
And also, I think at the beginning it's very helpful to have a second supervisor who's a much more experienced supervisor. They'll understand how the university works, all the rules and regulations. They'll have experience of different sorts of students and how you can handle them, how to form a relationship, how to deal with issues. So I think having someone more experienced is very helpful.
The advice I would give a research supervisor is to remember that throughout the supervision of their PhD student, an encouragement to have structured conversations around the professional and career development of their PhD student, and get the student to reflect on the skills and experience they're developing and any gaps that they might have in the experience, depending on where they want to move forward to in their career.